The Valley of Fear, 1915, Episode 1. The Cipher Message and Murder Warning. Welcome back, fellow detectives. After surviving the haunting tale of the Orange Pips and witnessing how vengeance can pursue its victims across oceans, you might think you've seen the limits of criminal persistence. But today we begin a new chapter in Holmes's career, one that will bring us face to face with his greatest adversary once more. Have you ever received a message so cryptic that it seemed like meaningless gibberish, only to discover it contained a warning of imminent murder? Prepare yourself for one of the darkest mysteries in Holmes's chronicles, a case that begins with a coded warning and ends in the shadow of Professor Moriarty himself. Picture yourself on a cold January morning in 1888 at 221B Baker Street. You're having breakfast with Holmes and Watson when the Morning Post arrives, bringing with it a telegram that will launch us into a labyrinth of mystery. Holmes opens the envelope with his usual casual efficiency, but as his eyes scan the contents, you notice something remarkable. His expression shifts from mild curiosity to intense fascination. "Remarkable," Holmes murmurs, passing the telegram to Watson. "What do you make of this, old friend?" Watson reads aloud, his brow furrowed in confusion. 534, C2 13 127, 36 31 4 17 21 41, Douglas 109 293 537, Birlstone 26, Birlstone 947 171. Turn to your fellow detective beside you. What could this jumble of numbers possibly mean? Is it a code, a cipher, or perhaps just the random scribblings of a madman? Notice how Holmes is already reaching for a particular book from his shelf, a gleam of recognition in his eyes. The signature is quite interesting. Holmes notes, pointing to the bottom of the telegram, it's from Porlock, a name that should mean nothing to most people, but to me it represents one of the most peculiar arrangements in London's criminal underworld. He settles into his chair with evident satisfaction, clearly relishing the intellectual challenge before him. Watson looks puzzled. "Porlock, I don't recall you mentioning this person before." Holmes's explanation reveals a fascinating glimpse into his secret network of informants. Fred Porlock is not his real name, of course. He's a minor agent in the organization of the most dangerous man in London, a man whose name I dare not speak too loudly lest we attract his attention. Here's where you need to pay close attention, detective. Who could this mysterious criminal mastermind be? If you've been following our series, you might remember a certain professor who supposedly perished at Reichenbach Falls, but Holmes's careful words suggest that death may not have been as final as we believed. Porlock sends me information occasionally, Holmes continues. Always encrypted, always paid in advance. He's terrified of his employer discovering our arrangement, and rightly so. The penalty for betrayal in that organization is swift and final. The gravity in Holmes's voice tells you that this is no ordinary criminal network we're dealing with. Watson presses for more details. But why would this Porlock risk his life to send you coded messages? Holmes's answer reveals the complex motivations that drive informants: money, primarily, but also fear. Porlock sees the terrible things his employer orders, and some small part of his conscience rebels. He won't testify, he won't directly betray his master, but he'll send me warnings when innocent lives are at stake. Now comes the fascinating part. Watching a master cryptographer at work, Holmes pulls down a thick, well-worn book from his shelf. The key to Porlock's ciphers is always the same: a book code. The numbers represent page numbers and word positions within a specific text. The challenge is identifying which book he's using. Think about this for a moment. If you wanted to create an unbreakable code using a book, how would you ensure your recipient could decode it? You'd need a book common enough that anyone could obtain it, yet specific enough that only the intended recipient would know which edition to use. Holmes flips through several volumes, testing different possibilities. Porlock usually uses Whitaker's Almanac, but these page numbers seem too high. Let me try. He pulls out a different book, an American Almanac, and begins decoding with practiced efficiency. Watching Holmes work is like watching a musician perform a complex piece. His fingers dance across the pages, jotting down words with incredible speed. 534, page 534, word 2. There, page 13, word 127 is yes, Watson, I believe we're getting somewhere. Can you imagine the tension building as each word reveals itself? It's like watching a photograph slowly develop in a dark room, the image gradually becoming clearer until the full picture emerges. And what a chilling picture it is. After several minutes of intense concentration, Holmes reads out the decoded message. There is danger. May come very soon. One Douglas, rich country gentleman, now at Birlstone Manor House. Birlstone. Confidence is pressing. He sets down his pen with a troubled expression. Watson leans forward urgently. Good heavens, Holmes, this is a warning of murder. We must alert this Douglas fellow immediately. But Holmes raises a cautionary hand, his mind already racing through the implications. Notice the incomplete nature of the message, Watson. Confidence is pressing. Porlock was interrupted mid-transmission. Something or someone stopped him from finishing his warning. Here's where your detective instincts should be tingling. What could have interrupted Porlock so suddenly that he couldn't complete his message? Was he discovered by his employer? Did something happen that made continuing the warning too dangerous? The possibilities are deeply unsettling. Holmes immediately springs into action, his earlier leisurely breakfast forgotten. Watson, we must determine where this Birlstone is located and how quickly we can reach it. If Porlock's warning is genuine, and I have no reason to doubt him that a man's life hangs in the balance, he grabs his railway directory and begins flipping through pages with urgent purpose. Birlstone. Here it is, a small village in Sussex, about 40 miles south of London. There's a train from Victoria Station that can get us there in under 2 hours. Holmes checks his pocket watch with growing concern. But the next train doesn't leave for 3 hours. We may already be too late. Watson suggests the obvious solution. Why not telegraph the local police, warn them of the danger, and have them protect this Douglas? But Holmes shakes his head with the wisdom of experience. And tell them what exactly? That an anonymous informant in a criminal organization sent us a coded warning. They'd think we were mad. No, Watson, we need more information before we can act effectively. At this crucial moment, there's a sharp knock at the door. Mrs. Hudson announces a visitor. Inspector MacDonald from Scotland Yard to see you, Mr. Holmes. The timing is so perfect that it seems almost providential, or perhaps ominous. What could bring a Scotland Yard inspector to Baker Street at precisely this moment? Inspector Alec MacDonald strides in, a tall Scotsman with a grave expression that immediately tells Holmes something terrible has happened. Mr. Holmes, I've come about a murder case that occurred last night in Sussex. Given the unusual circumstances, the local constabulary thought you might be interested. Holmes's face goes very still. Where in Sussex, Inspector? MacDonald consults his notes. A place called Birlstone. The victim was a wealthy American gentleman named John Douglas residing at Birlstone Manor House, found shot to death in his own study under most mysterious circumstances. The room falls silent as the implications sink in. Watson stares at Holmes in shocked realization, while you, dear detective, must be feeling that cold chill that comes when a prophesied disaster comes true exactly as predicted. Porlock's warning arrived too late, or perhaps Holmes decoded it too slowly. Either way, John Douglas is already dead. Holmes shows MacDonald the decoded telegram explaining its source without revealing too much about his informant network. This warning arrived just this morning, Inspector. I was preparing to travel to Birlstone to prevent exactly what has already occurred. Tell me everything you know about the murder. MacDonald's account paints a picture of baffling complexity. Douglas was found around midnight in his study, shot in the face with a shotgun at close range. The weapon was left at the scene, a peculiar sawed-off shotgun of American manufacture. The study was locked from the inside, with Douglas's wedding ring and some other personal effects missing from the body. Here's where the mystery deepens into true puzzlement, detective. A locked room murder, a disfiguring wound that makes identification difficult, missing jewelry suggesting robbery, yet an American weapon suggesting a more personal motive. What does your intuition tell you about this combination of clues? There's more that's curious, MacDonald continues. The manor house is surrounded by a moat crossed only by a drawbridge that's raised every night at 11. The bridge was found raised this morning, yet somehow the murderer entered the study, committed the crime, and escaped, all while the house was supposedly sealed off from the outside world. Watson interjects with the obvious question, could it have been someone already inside the house, a member of the household who committed the murder and then tried to make it look like an outside intruder? MacDonald shakes his head doubtfully. The household consists of Douglas himself, his wife, the butler, the housekeeper, and a friend named Cecil Barker, who's been staying with them. All were accounted for at the time of death. Holmes's eyes gleam with that particular intensity that tells you he's spotted something significant. Inspector, you mentioned the victim was shot in the face. How certain are you of the identification? Could there be any doubt that the body is actually John Douglas? MacDonald looks startled by the question. Well, Mrs. Douglas identified him by his clothes and physical build, but the face was so badly damaged by the shotgun blast that facial features were unrecognizable. Interesting, Holmes murmurs, more to himself than the others. Very interesting indeed. He turns to MacDonald with sudden decision. Inspector Watson and I will accompany you to Birlstone immediately. This case has elements that suggest it may be far more complex than a simple murder, or even a simple murder mystery. As preparations are made for the journey to Sussex, Holmes pulls Watson aside for a private word. Notice, old friend, how perfectly this murder aligns with Porlock's warning. A wealthy gentleman named Douglas at Birlstone Manor, killed within hours of when the warning was sent. This suggests the criminal organization knew exactly when and where the murder would occur. Watson's face shows dawning horror. Good Lord, Holmes, are you suggesting that Porlock's employer, that Moriarty himself, orchestrated this murder? Holmes's expression is grimmer than Watson has seen in years. I'm suggesting that we may be dealing with more than a simple crime of passion or robbery. This has all the hallmarks of an execution, carefully planned, expertly carried out, and designed to send a message. But what message? Watson asks, bewildered. And why would such a powerful criminal organization target an obscure country gentleman? Holmes's answer sends chills through everyone in the room. That, Watson, is precisely what we must discover, because if I'm right, John Douglas was not killed for what he had, but for what he knew, or perhaps for something he did long ago that finally caught up with him. As the three men prepare to depart for Victoria Station, Holmes makes one final observation that sets the stage for the investigation to come. Gentlemen, we're about to enter a case that may prove to be one of the most dangerous I've ever undertaken. We're not just investigating a murder, we're pulling back the curtain on secrets that powerful people have killed to protect. The question we must answer is this: who was John Douglas? Really? Why did someone warn us about his impending death? And most crucially, is the body in that study actually Douglas? Or has someone staged an elaborate deception? Holmes's voice drops to a whisper, because if I've learned anything from years of battling criminal masterminds, it's that things are never quite what they seem when Professor Moriarty's shadow falls across a case. So tell me, Detective, did you notice the significance of the American shotgun? What about the missing wedding ring? Could that be a crucial clue rather than simple robbery? And most intriguing of all, why would Porlock risk everything to send a warning about this particular victim? The coded telegram has led us to a locked room mystery surrounded by a moat with a disfigured corpse and questions that multiply with every answer. And our next episode will travel to Birlstone Manor and begin unraveling the impossible crime that occurred within its walls. But be warned, this investigation will take us far beyond a simple whodunit into territories of revenge, secret societies, and sins from the past that refuse to stay buried. Join me next time as we investigate the locked room at Birlstone Manor, where we'll discover that sometimes the most important question isn't who committed the murder, but whether a murder was actually committed at all, committed at